start now. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our last chapter discussion on accounting information system. The last chapter will be general ledger and reporting system. So this follows now the culmination of our discussion of all the transaction cycles or the subsystems of accounting information system. So we started with the expenditure cycle, followed by the revenue cycle, and then production cycle. And then we had the payroll or human resource management cycle. And then this is the last one, which is the general ledger and reporting system. Okay. Okay, so this particular chapter, general ledger and reporting system, will discuss the processing operations that are involved in the general ledger and preparing reports that summarize the results of an organization's activities. Okay, so general ledger and reporting system, this plays a central role in a company's accounting information system. Its primary function is to collect and organize data from the following sources. The first group of source of the general ledger and reporting system would be the transaction cycles or the subsystems that we have discussed in the previous chapters. Yung expenditure, yung revenue, yung production, and then yung payroll cycles. These cycles class or subsystems have transactions, right? Say, nung diniscuss natin yung expenditure cycle, meron siyang purchases, and then the recording of liabilities, and then the payment of these liabilities. Sa revenue, we have the fulfillment of customer orders, yung delivery, and then recognition ng revenue, and then collection nga from our customers. And then we have the production cycle, yung production ng materials, plus the recording ng different costs comprising now the products that are being manufactured. And then, of course, the management of our human resources, the tracking of their attendance and work schedules, and then the preparation of the pay slips, as well as the payment of their wages and salaries. All of these are transactions that create journal entries. And therefore, all of these transaction cycles are sources now of data that are recorded in the general ledger. Ano yung mga data na nire-record dito? Yung general ledger. Diba? If you think of the manual setup class, the manual setup kasi, we record in the journal entries. If ma-remember ninyo, when you are first year students, second year students, when you're still learning how to record accounting transactions, you remember that the way we record transactions is automatically a debit and a credit. They are a pair and they should balance each other. Now, in an automated accounting system, you record transactions not by journal entries, but rather you input now the important data or information relevant to the particular transaction. You basically record transactions using an interface asking for, say, the name of your supplier. Ano yung item na bibilhin ninyo? Ilang item? Magkano per item? Ano yung total amount na in-order ninyo? Yun yung nire-record ninyo. However, these records or transactions, once entered into the system, they generate automatically a journal entry. So yung journal entries under an automated accounting information system basically is a byproduct of your transaction processing instead of directly recording journal entries. Yun yung kaibahan ng manual versus automated system. In a manual system, you directly record journal entries. But in an automated accounting information system, journal entries are byproducts of transaction processing. And they are one of the basic sources now of data inside your general ledger and reporting system. Another source of data is the treasurer office. The treasurer now provides information about financing and investing activities such as yung retirement natin ng debts, yung writing off ng obligations, yung pagbili natin or invest on certain stocks or properties, we call it investment properties, or the purchase or sale ng securities or even the acquisition ng own shares of a corporation and making them treasury shares. These are non-recurring transactions, meaning these are not related to your trade transactions. Hindi siya related sa ordinary course of trade or business. Nangyayari siya minsan, this year, wala. Probably next year, meron. So these are non-recurring. Nonetheless, these transactions result to journal entries. And therefore, the treasurer office is also another source of data that is reflected in your general ledger. Yung pag-write-off or probably pag-record ng, say, depreciation na hindi naman, anong tawag, hindi naka-program inside your expenditure cycle kasi nga walang fixed asset component. So, itong treasurer na to, ang kailangan nyo lang malaman, class, is that these transactions are non-recurring and non-trade related, meaning non-business or non-core business transactions. Another source would be the budget department, which provides now the budget numbers, and these budget numbers are entered into the general ledger and reporting system for purposes now of computing later on the variances, which we will discuss as we move forward in this chapter. And the fourth source will be the controller, which provides now the adjusting entries. These are non-recurring transactions. These are post-period transactions that are to be recorded inside your general ledger and reporting system in order now to reflect the actual balances of your operations. And we will discuss later on. Okay? So here, you're provided here a diagram that shows you the basic activities inside a general ledger and reporting system. What are these four basic activities? First will be to update the general ledger. Malamang sa malamang, this will be the first activity because the general ledger is being updated constantly coming from the four sources that we've mentioned a while ago. Second will be the posting of the adjusting entries. Third will be the preparation of the financial statements. And fourth will be the production of managerial reports. If you'll notice, the first three of these activities are the basic steps in an accounting cycle. And the culmination of steps 1, 2, 3 will be the production of a pro forma financial statements. Yung mga annual financial statements that are standardized and the same to all other companies or businesses. Ang magkaiba nga lang would probably be the account titles, but the pro forma, the form, as well as the manner of how we prepare these financial statements are the same. Yung statement of financial possession, statement of comprehensive income, statement of cash flows, these are pro forma financial statements. The fourth activity, on the other hand, indicates the production now of non-pro forma statements. We call them managerial reports. These are reports that don't follow. These reports don't follow a certain format, a certain or a standardized format, but are based now on the requirements or specifications now of the management. Say, for example, may kailangan ang management na segmentation, geographical segmentation ng business, or segments ng each department ng company, or say, by product, say, yung different products being produced will be the basis na of segmentation. These are not reflected in your pro forma financial statements. Kaya, hiniwalay yung production ng managerial reports. Nonetheless, the managerial reports that are being produced, even if they are not pro forma, they are still based on the general ledger balances, yung byproduct ng mga transactions na nirecord natin inside an accounting information system. Yun nga lang, meron siyang information na kinukuha sa ibang sources or ibang tables na hindi, di ba, for example, sa financial statements natin, hindi naman natin sinesegmentize yung net income, yung sa statement of comprehensive income. We just show the overall operating income and the net income of the company, diba? As a whole, as an entire organization. But for the production of managerial reports, it could be that the net income are to be reported by, say, different departments. Ano ba yung department na cost center? Ano ba yung department na revenue center? Ano ba yung product na pinaka-profitable? 'Di ba? Hindi naman natin sinisegmentize or hinihiwalay or hinihimay ang income statement based on products. But companies, in order to aid them in their decision making, are required now to, to have them segmentized per product para malaman nila which product is more profitable than the other. And therefore, it's a customized report, and we call them as managerial reports, right? Now, let's proceed to the typical design of an online general ledger and journal reporting system. So in an automated system, if you notice, from the subsystems, the treasurer, and even the controller transactions, these are not part of your transaction cycles, but nonetheless, they produce journal entries. If you notice, all of them end up in a general ledger database. Okay? And the general ledger database answers now to accounting inquiry. Say, for example, a user or a management would go now into the accounting system and would say, he wanted a report now covering the first half of 2021, January to June of 2021. So this particular inquiry now will result now to a temporary or tentative report, which is not yet reconciled probably, but this particular report will anchor from the general ledger database. So pwede na makita ngayon yung account status, account balances, yung cash flow projections, yung ating budget versus actual na variances, which will be determined by the management. So lahat sila naka-anchor sa general ledger. So it's really the end point now of our accounting information system, itong general ledger. Okay? So let's proceed now to our in detailed discussion of the different activities, di ba? Sinabi natin we have 4 activities, basic activities under the general ledger and reporting system. But of course, following yung ating discussion ng other cycles, meron tayong general issues of the general ledger and reporting system before we discuss the different activities. Again, meron tayong general issues. What are the threats ng general issues ng general ledger? Obviously, the first threat there would be the inaccurate or invalid general ledger data. So how do we mitigate this particular threat of an inaccurate or invalid general ledger data? Okay. Of course, the inaccurate general ledger data as a threat can result now to misleading reports that cause managers to make erroneous decisions. And therefore, this particular threat is very critical because once you produce now erroneous reports, business managers or the business owners or the executives will subsequently make erroneous decisions. These errors could be in a manner na medyo mahirap solusyonan. Of course, so therefore, it is important that there are preventive controls that you have to institute inside your accounting information system. Similarly, errors in your financial statements that are provided to your creditors, to your investors, and other government agencies can cause now these stakeholders to make wrong decisions. In addition, errors in financial statements and reports that are provided to these external stakeholders can also result in governmental fines, okay? And a negative reaction to the capital markets if your company is a public corporation, meaning your company is being traded in the stock exchange. So therefore, ang sinasabi natin dito, it is critical and it is essential that you produce accurate financial statements because erroneous ones have massive repercussions. Now, one way to mitigate the threat of inaccurate or invalid general data is to use now various data processing integrity controls. These integrity controls we have already discussed in the previous chapters in internal controls. Okay? They minimize the risk of data input errors when the treasurer and controller make direct journal entries. Okay? So, it is also important that we restrict now the access to the general ledger because restriction now to the general ledger would create now certain accountability. So any error or unauthorized access to this general ledger database can only be pointed to a single individual or to a group of individual, probably two or three, because they're the only ones given access. Making the general ledger database available to everyone else in the organization would result now to um, unauthorized employees making changes now to the master data or making changes now to the journal entries being created. One could have stolen money from the company, and to rectify the stolen amount, it has to be reflected in the system para hindi siya ma-detect. And having access now to the general ledger would lead to this undetection, because this person stealing from the company can just reflect the loss of cash or the loss of asset through changes now in the general ledger by instituting now changes by a journal entry being recorded in the general ledger directly. So therefore, the balances are rectified. So walang nawawala at the end of the day. Another would be to create now multi-factor authentication should be used to restrict access now to the general ledger. In addition, authorization controls like an access control matrix and compatibility test should also be implemented to limit now the functions that each legitimate user may perform. For example, most managers should be given now read-only access to the general ledger in order for them to get the balances they want to provide in their reports. But this is read-only access. Therefore, they cannot manipulate the information or data because it's read-only. They can only generate reports for their own use, for their monthly reports to the upper management, but they cannot alter these reports kasi read-only lang siya. Alright? It is also important that you carefully restrict the read-only privileges to specific portions of the system. The access control matrix will allow you to design to limit the functions that can be performed at various points or terminals of your accounting information system, especially dun sa various input terminals, yung nagpapasok ng data, like say, doon sa purchasing cycle or sa revenue cycle, di ba, may input terminal there. You also have to access the you have to limit the access of the individuals in these input terminals to the general ledger para they cannot correct the transactions or say change the transactions that they have processed to say reflect now losses or to reflect now theft made in that particular transaction. A general threat now, a second general threat will be the unauthorized disclosure of financial statement. It is important that you prevent the premature release of your financial statements, because doing so is likely to result in fines from various regulatory agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission. If this would lead now to insider trading, you'll be liable under the Securities and Regulations Code or the SRC. And of course, possible shareholder lawsuits. Yung lawsuits mismo galing sa shareholders kasi may mga prematurely released internal or sensitive financial information. And the best control procedure for reducing the risk of unauthorized disclosure of financial statements would be access controls. That's 2.1. Okay? Which we have already discussed kasi yung access controls na yan, general principle niyan is that you only give access to trusted individuals or individuals with certain possessions. And if something will be prematurely released, these individuals will be held liable kasi sila lang naman ang may access. Another control now for an authorized disclosure financial statement would be encryption. Encrypting now your database means that you provide an additional protection by making now all the information inside your general ledger database unintelligible to anyone who succeeds to obtain the information. Why unintelligible? Because you cannot understand the information that you have actually intercepted on the database unless you get the encrypting key or the keyword. The parang encrypting keyword. This particular encrypting keyword, if used side by side with the data that you have obtained, you can now unlock this data and, transform this into a readable information which you can understand. But since it was jumbled in a way na encrypted siya without the key, you cannot understand whatever you've stolen. So encryption is another layer, additional layer of protection for your general ledger database. The third general threat class will be loss or destruction of data, which we have already discussed in our previous chapter in internal controls, can be best addressed by a backup and disaster recovery procedures. The backup and disaster recovery procedures may include timely backups of the database, or the creation now of a separate facility where you back up all the data and information far from your corporate headquarters or far from places that are susceptible to calamities or destruction, like say non-earthquake prone area, or say non-flooding area, or malayo siya from say congested part of the metropolis or the city, para pag may sunog, it may not be easily be parang maabot ng fire and then masunog yung backup ninyo. So you put it somewhere else. Or pag ma-hit ka ng calamity, for example, your main headquarters, the backup which is located in a separate location is safe and can be re-uploaded in your system. Para tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung processing ng mga empleyado nyo even if your main headquarters or your business place has been hard hit by the calamity. Okay? So now let's proceed now to the basic activities under the general ledger. The first activity there, class, would be the update of the general ledger. The update now of the general ledger will consist now of posting your journal entries which come from two originating sources. As I've discussed a while ago in the earlier part of the lecture, one of the originating source for the update of the general ledger will be the accounting subsystems. Each of these subsystems, namely the revenue, expenditure, production, and payroll cycle, will create a journal entry that will update the general ledger. In theory, the general ledger could be updated for each individual transaction. But in practice, some companies update the general ledger through a summarization of these transactions. Could be a summary of the daily transactions of a particular nature, or a weekly summary, or a monthly summary. Okay? In this summary of journal entries represents now all transactions that have occurred during a given period. And they are summarized now in a file, or a file called a journal voucher file. A journal voucher is a file that stores all the journal entries that are used to update the general ledger. So it could be a journal voucher file for this week, and this will update now the general ledger for expenditures, for inventory acquired. Okay? Another originating source for the update of the general ledger is the treasurer. Okay, the treasurer's office provides for journal entries which are non-recurring, non-regular basis. This could include now, as we've discussed in the first few slide decks, would include the retirement or write-off of your debt or obligation, the purchase now or sale of your investment properties, or your stock certificates or securities, equity securities, or the acquisition of your own shares, transforming them into treasury shares. Okay? The journal voucher file will contain now information that are normally found in a general journal in your manual accounting system. What are these data that you usually find in the manual general journal? It could be the date of the journal entry, the accounts debited, the accounts credited, and the total amounts. So the journal voucher file here is a byproduct of not an input in the posting process, which I have mentioned a while ago, which is in the automated accounting system environment. Okay, so what are the threats now that that would cause some problems in this particular activity, the updating of our general ledger? The first threat class will be inaccurate updating of the general ledger. Okay? The second one will be the unauthorized journal entries. And both of these threats can lead now to poor decision making based on erroneous information and subsequently in an erroneous reflection or reporting of your financial performance. Okay? Now, there are two sources now of journal entries, as we have already established, right? Uh, the journal entries that are to be made by the treasurer, which is the second originating source, okay, are what we call original data entry. Meaning, original siya coming from the user. Meaning, nag-create ka talaga ng journal entry as it is. Like, you already have in mind what to record, what to debit, and what to credit. And therefore, when you create the journal entry in the treasurer's office perspective, yung hindi siya calling from the transaction cycles, you are really entering a journal entry. Debit, credit, ano yung account title ng debit, ano yung account title ng credit, and then the amounts. Unlike the accounting subsystems where you don't really record the journal entry as an original entry. The journal entries here are again byproducts of the transaction processing. Now, in the treasurer journal entry class, the uh, there are what we call input controls that are used in order to ensure that the original data entry that is being created by the treasurer will be accurate and complete. So you have the different processing controls here in updating the general ledger under the second source, which is the original data entry. So what are these different processing controls? First will be the validity check. The validity check is a control that ensures now the general ledger account exists inside the system for each account number that is referenced in your journal entry. So for example, if you create now a journal entry, you pick now the code of the account title from the chart of accounts. The validity check will determine if what you've entered is actually an existing or correct account title. If that will be erroneous, a message will come out saying that the account title does not exist, or the account title cannot be found, or basically there's a sound that will tell you that there's something wrong. So you probably have missed a zero or a number for that particular account code kasi wala siya nag-exist. So that particular feature pa lang ensures na kahit hindi mo pa na-add yung journal entry, alam na that the account title to be created do exist. Okay? The second control would be the field or format checks. This particular check ensures that the amount field in the journal entry only contains numeric data. So for example, in the particular field, alam na natin, debit ka ng purchases, credit ka ng liability. For example lang, nagpasok ka ng amount. For example, in that particular amount, you have to enter 20,000. May nalagay ka na asterisk. The field or format checks will determine now that that particular journal entry will not be added because you have provided now a non-recognized form in that particular field. Kasi numbers lang dapat ang tinatanggap doon sa amount ng particular transaction na ini-enter ninyo. So, hindi siya pwedeng later on may maglabas na kulang yung balance kasi yung napasok mo is 10, instead of 10,000, ang napasok mo is 1,000 asterisk. Kasi ano lang, 3 zero lang ang napasok ninyo. So, with that particular asterisk, the transaction now will not push through. Okay? Okay, sorry. Now, the third processing control will be the zero balance check. Okay, the zero balance check will verify now that the total debits equal the total credits in your journal entry. Okay? So dapat pag nag-create ng journal entry, same ang debit saka credit. So kung hindi yan siya same, hindi yan siya ma-add. So that's another validation or input control ng journal entry creation under the general ledger general ledger database. Pang-apat would be completeness test to ensure that all pertinent data are entered, especially the source of the journal entry or even the date. So kung walang date yan, hindi yan siya magpo-push through. So that's the completeness test. So another completeness test would be the question on account title. If walang account title, then hindi mo mapupush through yung ating transaction. So that's another completeness test. Another verification class, number 5, would be the closed loop verification. Itong closed loop verification, it matches now the account numbers with the account description to ensure that the correct general ledger account is being accessed. So for example, ipapakita ng user interface natin dyan na ito yung account code. Ang equivalent niya na account title, let's say for example, allowance for doubtful accounts. Kapag nagpasok ka ng code na yan at nag-match siya doon sa chart of accounts natin ng certain account title, yun yung ilalabas niya. So as a user, you are apprised now that allowance for doubtful accounts nga yung pinipick ninyo na account. So that's another input control. The sixth one class will be the sign check, which the general account balance, once updated or once the update is completed, you verify that balance is of appropriate nature, whether debit ba or credit. And the last processing control would be the run-to-run totals, which is to verify now the accuracy of the journal voucher batch processing. Okay, so the computer calculates the new balance of the general ledger account, and based on its beginning balance and the total debits and credits applied to that account, it compares now that with the actual account balance in the updated general ledger. Any discrepancies indicate now a processing error that has to be investigated. So those are the different input controls that you have to address in order for you to ensure that what you're entering is correct. And of course, the journal entry that you're preparing can be saved inside the database. Okay, so those are the data entry processing integrity controls. Another control that can be used, class, to mitigate these threats will be the reconciliation and control reports. Reconciliations and control reports can detect whether any errors were made during the process of updating the general ledger. One form of reconciliation is the preparation now of the trial balance. You know the trial balance, right? A trial balance, class, I'm trying to throat ko, is a report that lists now the balances for all the general ledger all right. Okay, I'm asking water now. The trial balance, class, is a summary of all the balances of your general ledger accounts. It reflects now the fact that all activities, thank you, all activities have been properly recorded. The total debits, the total of all the debit balances in various accounts should equal the total credit, kaya nga trial balance, just ko. If hindi nag-balance, then there is a posting error. But this is already minimized. In fact, nagbabalance talaga sa isang automated accounting information system. The question na nga lang is that is it an actual reflection of the nature of the transactions? Kasi rare talaga na napupush through ang transaction na hindi balansyado. So hindi na issue sa automated accounting information system yung hindi nagbabalance na trial balance. Yun nga lang, kahit balance yan siya, hindi assurance na reflective yung mga transactions na napasok dun sa totoong nature ng mga transactions. Now, another control class will be the creation of an audit trail. In an automated accounting information system, an audit trail is a path that allows a transaction to be traced through a data processing system from its point of origin to the output or backwards from output or to the point of origin. If you go to an automated accounting information system, for example, accounts receivable, pag i-right-click mo yun siya, may mga ganong accounting information system na pag i-right-click mo, you can right-click it and go to its source. So an accounting information system source, an accounts receivable source could be a goods receipt, a delivery report, and the sales order. So pag nakita mo yung source na yan, makita mo na properly approved ang accounts receivable. The accounts receivable was created because there was a delivery made to a particular customer. And the delivery made to that particular customer came from a legitimate existing sales order. So may series siya na documents. So makita mo yung source ng isang document. And that is the audit trail. And that can be seen by an auditor, especially an IT auditor, because in an automated accounting system, we already got rid of the paper ones, the paper documents. And therefore, our basis now for these transactions found inside the accounting information system or the database will be the related source documents. Okay? A properly designed audit trail class provides the ability to perform these two activities. First is tracing. You trace any transaction from its original document. And the second one is tracing now any item appearing in a particular report back through the general ledger to its original source document. So this will provide you a means now to verify that all recorded transactions are indeed authorized transactions and are recorded or were recorded correctly. Kasi merong basis. So if there's a discrepancy between the delivery report and the accounts receivable report, therefore someone there made a mistake or someone made something fraudulent. Kasi di ba nga, hindi pwedeng may variance ang dineliver na item sa customers and the amount of revenue recognized in the accounts receivable document. Okay, so that's another control. Okay. Another control class would be access controls. Hindi naman nagbabago ang nature niyan. We've already discussed. And then reconciliations and control reports, which we've already discussed, similar to 4.2 and 4.3. Right? So let's proceed now to our next activity, which is the second one, which is the posting of adjusting entries. The posting now of adjusting entries class arise from 5 categories, meaning bakit tayo nag-adjusting entries? Because they arise from these 5 basic categories of transactions. The first one will be the accrual. Okay? They are entries made at the end of the accounting period to reflect now events that have occurred, but for which cash has not yet been received or dispersed. Accrual, that's basic for us. We've already discussed this one in your basic accounting. Second basic category of source of adjusting entry will be the deferrals. Deferrals are entries made at the end of the accounting period to reflect now the exchange of cash prior to the performance of the related event. Examples will be the recognition in advance payments from customers as liability and recording certain payments as prepaid assets. Yung accrual, ano ba ang example niyan? These are the recognition or recording of your interest revenue earned and wages that are still payable. Okay? The third one will be estimates. May journal entries tayo. We have adjusting journal entries for estimates. These are entries to reflect now a portion of expenses expected to occur over a number of accounting periods. Example will be depreciation and bad debt expenses. Okay, because these are mere estimates. The 4 basic category will be the revaluation. These are entries made to reflect now either differences between the actual and recorded value of an asset or a change in accounting principle. And the 5th one will be correction. These are entries made to counteract the effects of errors found in the general ledger. Now, what are the different threats that that will undermine the posting of your adjusting entries. The first will be the inaccurate adjusting entries, and 7 will be unauthorized adjusting entries. Pretty much self-explanatory. And we go on now to the controls to address this one. Of course, it's still the same. Yung ating integrity controls or access controls. For inaccurate adjusting entries, we have the spreadsheet error protection controls and then the standard adjusting entries. Um, the unauthorized adjusting entries, on the other hand, can be addressed through access controls, reconciliations, and control reports, and then, of course, the use of the audit trail and creation and review. Okay? Now, for the controls now for the inaccurate adjusting entries, note that adjusting entries are calculated um, in spreadsheets. Therefore, it is important to employ now spreadsheet error protection controls that we've discussed in the internal controls chapter. This additional control is provided by creating now a standard adjusting entry file. A standard adjusting entry file improves now input accuracy by eliminating the need to repeatedly key the same types of journal entries. Okay? Now let's proceed to the preparation of the financial statements. The preparation now of the financial statements can be mitigated by threats that will result now to the inaccurate financial statements and, of course, the fraudulent financial reporting. So how do we mitigate these threats? Okay. The the inaccurate financial statements can be addressed by the processing integrity controls. Okay, the um, you combine it with the package, the use of the packaged software to produce financial statements to minimize the risk of numerical errors. Okay, now you also include there as a mitigating control the training and experience in applying now the international financial reporting standards and what we call the XBRL. What is an XBRL? An XBRL report is uh, we call it extensible business reporting language, which is a variant now of what we call the extensible markup language, which is specifically designed for use in communicating the content of financial data. So XBRL is more of a reporting language which can be used now in an automated financial accounting information system that you will have to use side by side with the traditional or legacy financial reporting standards. And then, of course, another control will be the use of audit, okay, which is similar to the use of audit as a control now for fraudulent financial reporting. So what is the audit contemplated here? The contemplated here audit would refer now to external audit. Okay, this is the audit to be conducted by an independent auditing firm that will review the financial statements if they are fairly presented and free from fraudulent or misrepresentation. Okay, this is an independent review class, not internal, okay, of all the special journal entries to the general ledger. Okay, the independent review that will be conducted here will test the appropriateness of the journal entries recorded in the general ledger and other adjustments. Internal auditors will have to regularly review all the adjustments to the general ledger, but ultimately the determination if there is fraud or material misrepresentation will be conducted by the independent review, which will be done by an external auditor. Okay. Now, for the last activity will be the production now of managerial reports. Okay. The production now of managerial reports inside the general ledger Um, wait lang. My throat is kind of um, the production of managerial reports class. These would range from could be budgets to help managers plan and evaluate performance. It can be an operating budget that will depict now planned revenues and expenditures for each organizational unit. It could be capital expenditures budget that will show you the planned cash inflows and outflows for each of the capital project or capital expenditures. Um, if you will say production of managerial reports, it's not simply financial data. It could also include graphs. It could also include um, charts that would easily show the financial data or in a form that can easily be appreciated by the management, that can easily be digested and understood. Okay? So, the threat now for the production of managerial data would be the poorly designed reports and graphs. This will be the threat, meaning you are producing managerial reports that are unintelligible or difficult to understand or cannot be appreciated by the management. So to address this particular threat of producing now poorly designed reports and graphs, the controls that have to be introduced are to be divided into three subsections. First will be the use of what we call responsibility accounting. Second will be the balance scorecard. And third will be understanding the principles of proper graph design. So what is this responsibility accounting? Responsibility accounting class, to properly evaluate the performance, the reports should highlight the results that can directly be controlled by a person or organizational unit. Meaning when you evaluate now a particular person, you only use as basis for this evaluation those elements that can fall under the direct control of that person or that particular department. Responsibility accounting does this by producing now a report um, which will produce now a set of correlated reports that break down the organization's overall performance by the specific subunits which can most directly control these activities. Note that each report under responsibility accounting um, will show you the actual costs and the variances from the budget that has been previously prepared. Note that if you simply compare now the result of a particular department versus the budget, it will result now to a massive variance that is not reflective of the overall performance of that particular department without regard now of the variable component and the fixed component of a particular department. Kasi di ba, if the particular department will deviate from, say, what was budgeted, but that deviation will always result to changes in the variable components of the variable elements, not the entirety of the cost, then therefore, that will give you now a more complete picture of the performance of that particular department. Okay? This is especially true, class, if these particular departments were treated as cost centers. Pag cost centers kasi, 'di ba, meron kang tinatawag na fixed cost and then at the same time variable cost. So kung merong deviation from the budget, ang nagbago dyan, class, will be the variable cost. Yung fixed cost, hindi mo pwedeng galawin yan kasi with or without deviation, yan na yung fixed cost ng particular department. Okay, so that should be properly reflected in your report. Okay? And we mentioned that one, we fall now under the what we call the flexible budgeting. The flexible budgeting now is a budget in which the amounts are stated in terms of formulas based on the actual level of activity. For example, flexible budgeting would entail now dividing the budget for each line in the general uh, report of the particular department into what we call now the fixed and variable cost components. In this way, the budget standards would automatically be adjusted by any unplanned increases in the production, and any differences between these adjusted standards and the actual cost can more appropriately be interpreted. Ano naman itong tinatawag natin na balance scorecard? A balanced scorecard class is a report that provides a multidimensional perspective of organizational performance. A balanced scorecard contains measures reflecting now the four perspectives of organization. What are these four perspectives? First will be financial. Second is customer, internal operations, customer. Then third will be internal operations. And then fourth will be innovation and learning. Okay? The financial section will contain now indicators of past performance, whereas the three other sections, the internal operations, innovation, and learning, this will include indicators for future performance. These are future financial performance indicators. For each dimension, the balance scorecard shows the organization's goals and specific measures that reflect the performance in attaining these goals. And together, these four dimensions of the balance scorecard will provide now a much more comprehensive review of organizational performance than that provided by financial measures alone. Okay? So, that's the balance scorecard. Now, for the training on proper graph design, it is imperative that in order to mitigate the threat of a poorly designed reports and graphs, you also have to adhere the two basic principles, essential principles in the creation of an accurate graph or report. Okay, so what are these two essential principles? The first is to begin the vertical axis at zero. When you prepare now a graph or report, you have to accurately reflect the actual change in the data. And you have to begin at a value other than zero. It will result now to a distortion of your visual magnitude of trend. So therefore, if you are creating a graph or chart, you have to begin at zero. There must be a zero, the vertical axis at zero. So even if you begin at 10,000, you have to input a data, or you have to input the data starting from zero, then 10,000, and then followed by the subsequent financial information. Okay? You always have to begin at an axis at zero. Second essential principle for the creation of reports and graphs, well, that they have to depict now time series data. Okay? What is the time series data? When you violate this particular principle, it may cause now the viewer to form an erroneous initial impression of the nature of your graph or chart, or the nature of the change in the data. For example, now, if when you create a data and there is no series, what will happen now is that you will produce a graph, okay, that will be graphically distorted, okay, and there will be a what we call reverse chronological presentation instead of a proper series of presentation. Like visually, you start year 2021 in the left, and then 2020 so right, then 2019 right again, and then 2018 so on and so forth. Now, if your growth class happens in 2020 and 2021, it will show you at the left a high level of sales and then pababa. It will create now a wrong impression that there is reduction of sales or decrease in sales instead of producing now growth. So visually, you have to prepare your graph or your chart starting from left, climbing now to the right. So any increases will be reflective kasi from left papuntang right, there is a steady increase of your chart, and therefore first impression pa lang without going into the details of the financial data, you can already have an impression na merong financial growth kasi it was visually proper. Okay? And that is one being addressed by a time series of presentation of your graph or charts that is visually proper. It should start from left and then going to the right. So from 2020, 2015 siguro, left, then 2016, 2017, 2018. And that will show you a graph na pa-increase. Okay? So that's very important as well. Kasi a poorly designed report, even how accurate it is, if it cannot be appreciated or to create now a wrong initial impression, then wala din. Kasi it will already create a violent reaction to the management or to the consumers of these managerial reports. Now, as a conclusion, class, the general ledger and the financial reporting system integrates and summarizes the results of your various accounting cycles, or we call them the subsystems of an accounting information system, namely the revenue, expenditure, production, and human resources cycles. The general ledger is the central master file in your entire accounting system. Consequently, the implementation now of control procedures in the general ledger and financial reporting system is very important, okay, to ensure that there is accuracy and security. Important controls include now data processing, integrity checks for the general voucher, which we have discussed intensively a while ago, that are to be posted in your general ledger, the access controls, the integrity controls, the creation of an adequate audit trail, and the appropriate backup and disaster recovery procedures. Okay? The outputs that are to be produced by the general ledger and financial reporting system or subsystem of your accounting information system shall fall into two primary categories: financial statements and managerial statements, or we call them managerial reports. The former, the financial statements, are prepared periodically in accordance with the regulatory frameworks, either if you're in a country where it's a GAAP recognized, or in the Philippines, IFRS. And they are to be distributed both to internal users and external users. The managerial reports, on the other hand, are strictly for internal use only, and therefore can include now comparisons between the actual performance and the budgeted performance. The usefulness of these managerial reports, whether presented in the form of tables or graphs, is affected by how well they are designed. Okay? So that's where we conclude our discussion now on chapter 9 of the accounting information system. This will be the last one, the general ledger and financial reporting system.